Hi kid, and welcome to the latest KidTime StoryTime.
Oh, we are celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. Day and weekend, and this is the perfect book. You know why?
Tell us why, Doug the Dinosaur.
Because it says holidays and heroes, and this is a holiday to celebrate an American hero.
Also, I have a dream.
Oh boy.
I have a dream that one day I shall be president.
It's true. Green Bear talks about it all the time, about being president.
I'm not going to be just a president.
Oh no.
I am going to be the first green president of these United States.
Which is really cool because we have never had one of those before.
So, I'd like to dedicate this to my fellow dreamers.
Yeah, what he said. Dreamers.
Okay, let us celebrate Martin Luther King Day. And he was a big dreamer too. And not just a dreamer, a doer. Because he actually saw many of his dreams come true because of his hard work. On the third Monday of January, we celebrate the birthday of an important American, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King worked hard to change laws and attitudes that were unfair and hurtful to Black people. In his heart, he knew that all people should be treated with fairness and respect. Fairness was important to Martin Luther King, and it should be to all of us, because none of us want to be treated unfairly, nor do we want others to be treated unfairly. Martin Luther King Jr. was born, like all of us, on January 15th, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia. That's right, he was a Georgian. Let's see, his mother hugged her beautiful baby boy. His father was so happy he jumped up and touched the ceiling. Wow, he must have been tall. Martin's parents were living with his mother's parents in a big house on Auburn Avenue. Martin already had an older sister. The next year, his younger brother was born. So I guess he's the middle child. Martin's grandfather was the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church. When Martin was 2, his grandfather died. Martin's father, Martin Luther King Sr., became the new pastor of the church. And 30 years later, Martin would become pastor at the same church. So see, a very strong family tradition. And I bet you might have some in your own family too. Sometimes doctor families or writer families, artist families, police officer families. In this case, they were a pastor family. Martin's family knew very little about their ancestors, family members who lived a long time ago. But like most Black Americans, they knew that many of their ancestors probably had been slaves. For hundreds of years, African people were brought to America to work as slaves. Women, men, and children were captured in Africa and taken away from their families and homes.
Children? That's terrible.
I know. It was not a good period in our history. They were then chained up and put on crowded ships. If they survived the terrible voyage across the ocean, because it was rough, that was no love boat, they were sold as slaves when they reached America. In 1865, slavery finally ended in the United States. But the problem is that when Martin Luther King was born, there were still lots of problems left over from the time of slavery, and they were serious problems, especially in the South. Now remember, we just said that he was born in the South, and Black people in the South were treated as if they were not as good as white people. Black people were kept separate. They were segregated. That's the word they used back then. Segregated from white people. See, like here's a white sign for this water fountain, and here's a different water fountain for colored people. So white people and Black people weren't even allowed to drink from the same water fountain. Isn't that crazy? So segregation was everywhere, this book tells us. Where? Neighborhoods, churches, schools, swimming pools, libraries, parks, restaurants, buses, stores, restrooms, elevators, and water fountains. The list went on and on. It was very unfair. It was very hurtful. And Black people were getting tired of it. So Martin was growing up with people who loved and respected him. He actually didn't realize at first that there were other people who might feel differently about him. Well, when he was about 6, he had a white friend whose father owned a store across the street from Martin's house. So one day, the friend told Martin that they could no longer play together. What? Well, the friend's father wouldn't allow it. Well, what happens? At dinner that evening, Martin asks his parents, why? Why has this happened? And sadly, they explained that it was because Martin's skin was black. Well, imagine how shocked he was. It was so unfair. It was so hurtful. What difference did it make what color skin was, right? They were friends. Well, in his heart, he knew that the color of a person's skin should not matter to real friends. Friendship was important to Martin Luther King. Well, here's a picture of a school for black children only. Remember segregation times, 1942. Now Martin, well, he liked school very much. He was such a good student, and he's a brilliant man, so of course he was a good student. And he was actually so good, he was allowed to skip 2 grades. 2 grades, he was that good. Well, when he got to college, he found that the work was a lot harder, as it's gonna be, but he knew what to do. He just worked harder than ever. While he was in college, Martin decided he was going to be a minister like his dad. And he preached his very first sermon at Ebenezer Baptist Church. You know, the family church? It was a huge success. Now, after graduating from college, Martin went to a seminary. Now, that is a special school for people who want to become ministers. A seminary is like a reverend school. There, Martin learned that peaceful ways are more powerful than violence. See right here? I don't know if you can read that, but he's reading a book called The Gandhi Reader. Gandhi was a famous crusader also for human rights in India, and he was all about peaceful means of protest as opposed to violent means of protest. And well, he's reading it and Martin is learning that peace is the way to go instead of violence. That peace, even though you think it's very calm, it's very powerful. So Martin decided he would always try to love people, even those who treated him unfairly or hurt his feelings. Now that takes a lot of strength. To love someone who is mean to you, that takes a lot of strength of character. When Martin graduated from the seminary, remember seminary, it is a reverend school, he was the top student in his class. He won a scholarship to attend a graduate school at a big university. So then he goes and he studies for a bunch more years and he earns the highest degree a person can receive, a PhD, a doctorate. Now he was Dr. King. That's why we always hear Dr. Martin Luther King. It's a form of respect too, because somebody works very hard and studies for a long time to get that. During this time, Martin met and fell in love with Coretta Scott, a talented young woman who was studying music. La, 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 la. After their marriage, Martin was asked to be the pastor of a church in Montgomery, Alabama. Yolanda, the first of their 4 kids, was born in 1955, and then they had more kids, Martin III, I should say, Dexter and Bernice. And the Kings loved their kids and wanted them to be treated with kindness and respect, and probably fairness, right? You want your kids to be treated fairly. Well, what happens that starts the whole thing? Well, December 1st, 1955, that's a big important date. You might want to remember that for future book reports. An important event happened in Montgomery, Alabama. Remember, Martin is a pastor in Montgomery, Alabama. A black woman named Rosa Parks got on a bus to go home from work, and she sat down on a seat in the colored section at the back of the bus. Now soon, all the seats in both the colored section and the white section were full. Well, then a white man boarded the bus, and the driver told Mrs. Parks that she had to give up her seat. And when she refused, she was arrested. Now, remember, the bus is full. She's sitting in the part that she's allowed to sit. But because a white fellow comes on, and those times were very unfair, the bus driver wants her to move from her correct seat in her section where she's following the rules, even though they're nasty rules, and they want her to move for him. And she's tired. She's been working all day, and, well, she's also just tired of the unfairness. Well, the black people of Montgomery decided to protest. They refused to ride the buses until the unfair rules changed. Now, this was called a boycott, and you'll hear that word a lot as you study civil rights history. And in this boycott, Dr. King became the leader. There he is speaking about the bus boycott. Right there, a real life photo. The Montgomery bus boycott lasted 382 days. That's more than a year. And when it was over, black people could sit wherever they liked on a bus. Success! Well, they no longer had to give up their seats to white people, and they had won an important victory peacefully. Well, because the bus needed their business. So if you need somebody's business, you hit them in the pocketbook, I guess is really the strategy here. Because if you can't treat one set of customers one way, another set the other way, and charge them the same. No, they needed them, so they had to respect them as full human beings. In 1960, Dr. King was asked to come back to Atlanta, Georgia, remember where he was born, and he became co-pastor with his dad at Ebenezer Baptist Church. Also, Dr. King was the president of an important new civil rights group. This group wanted black people to have the same rights that white Americans had. In his heart, he knew that Americans of all colors should have the same rights. Equal rights were important to Martin Luther King. At this time, more and more white people were also joining black people in the work for equal rights. Black and white students together held sit-ins at lunch counters that were supposed to be reserved for whites only. Remember how we talked about these signs and they were segregating people, and here's this counter supposed to be only for white people? Well, they had a sit-in, which is a protest, and they had black and white students sit there and just wait to be served. Day after day, they returned to sit and wait. And sometimes they also sang songs like, "We shall overcome." When Dr. King joined a sit-in at a lunch counter in Atlanta, he was arrested and put in jail for several days. This was hard work, y'all. In the spring of 1963, Dr. King went to Birmingham, Alabama, one of the most segregated cities in the South. That means people were more separated there than ever before. And separation is bad because you don't get to know each other and become friends and understand that you're all basically the same person underneath the skin. Well, segregation, it makes us strangers to one another. And here we are in one of the most segregated cities in the South. Dr. King helped black people there plan protest marches like this one right here. These are real, actual photos. He always reminded the marchers, though, very important, do not use any kind of violence. Because remember, he's decided that peace and love is the way to go. Thousands of children and young people joined the peaceful marches. But one day, police suddenly turned fire hoses and attack dogs onto the marchers, and people across America were horrified.
Oh no, you mean there were kids who got hurt?
Yeah, kids and grown-ups got hurt.
That's terrible.
Don't cry, it's okay, it has a happy ending. 2 days later, another march began. This time, police refused to follow orders to attack the marchers. Oof.
Oh, okay, so it got better by the second time. Oh, that's a relief.
Yeah, well, it is progress, slow but steady and forward moving. Soon afterwards, life began to get better for black people in Birmingham, thanks to the courage of Dr. King and those who marched with him. Here's a nice statue of him right here in Birmingham, Alabama. In his heart, he knew that peaceful protest is more powerful than violence. Non-violence was important to Dr. Martin Luther King. And if you admire him, you admire his ways and you try to emulate them because they are the ways of love and peace. During the summer of 1963, do you recognize this right here? That is the statue of Abraham Lincoln at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. During the summer of 1963, Dr. King organized the March on Washington, and more than 250,000 people came. Black and white, rich and poor, all at the nation's capital. On August 28th, they all marched to the Lincoln Memorial. See, and here's a painting of it, and here is an actual picture of it. Isn't that cool? I'm gonna get close. Because this is such a good photo. I'm gonna get close for a second there. Look at that. There's a statue, and there's a podium right here, and all this is people. 250,000 people as far as the eye could see. An incredible turnout. And like I said, people from all walks and colors of life. Well, they heard many speeches on that day from many important Americans, all about the importance of equal rights. But there's the one speech that everyone still remembers and talks about, and it was given by Dr. Martin Luther King. I have a dream that one day, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. In his heart, he knew that his dream of a better America would come true someday. Dreams were important to Martin Luther King. In 1964, an important Civil Rights Act was signed by the President of the United States. And what did this act mean? That segregation was now against the law. Neighborhoods, churches, schools, swimming pools, libraries, parks, restaurants, buses, stores, restrooms, elevators, water fountains, and more. At last, there was no separation, no segregation. Black people were free to go anywhere they chose. Any elevator, drink out of any water fountain, live in any neighborhood, go to any church, attend any school, play in any park, eat at any restaurant, ride any bus, in any spot in it. Later in 1964, Dr. King was given the Nobel Peace Prize. Oh, that is a huge honor. It's given to those who have done the most to bring peace in the world. There he is. Oh, look at that big smile on his face. He should feel proud and accomplished and happy. Dr. King said that day that the award really belonged to the thousands of people who had worked with him. He gave the prize money, $54,000. That's a lot of money, especially back then. He gave that money to groups working for civil rights. In 1965, Dr. King went to Selma, Alabama, to help black people register to vote. Some white people there did not want black people to vote in elections, and trouble soon began. Dr. King called for a protest march from Selma to Montgomery, the state capital. Again, police attacked the marchers. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It was tough. It was really tough. Again, people across America were very upset when they heard the news. Hundreds of people, both black and white, rushed to Selma to join the march. So it was a process to change hearts and minds. And that's why he went at it with love, because that's the only way to really change a heart, by going in with love, not with hate. Well, what happens this day? The President of the United States sent 1,800 soldiers to protect the marchers. When the marchers finally arrived in Montgomery, they had walked over 50 miles in 5 days, and they had won the support of millions of Americans. The President now began to work for a law that would make it easier for black people to register and vote. Okay, another step forward. On April 3rd, 1968, Dr. King went to Memphis, Tennessee. Black sanitation workers there had asked him to help with a march for fair pay. Well, the night after he arrived, Dr. King gave a speech. He said that he knew life would soon get better for black people in America. I have been to the mountaintop, and I have seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we, as a people, will get to the promised land. Beautiful words, right? One of his most beautiful speeches. He had so many. But the next day, Dr. King was shot and killed. And there's a wreath right there where he was shot. Dr. King was only 39 years old when he died. He did all that before he was 40. During his short life, he had worked hard. Thousands of other people of all colors had worked with him because he was inspiring to people. Together, they had been able to change some of the laws and attitudes that were unfair and hurtful to black people. But the work was not finished. It would be up to others to carry on the work now that Dr. King had started. It would be up to others to make peace and fight with love. In his heart, he knew that people of all colors can live together in peace and harmony. Peace was important to Martin Luther King. And here we have people, demonstrators in front of the White House after the death of Dr. Martin Luther King. And it says here in this sign, let his death not be in vain. And what does that mean? Let him not have died for nothing. So we have to carry on the work is what that means. When we celebrate the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we remember his dream. How can we keep the dream alive? In our hearts, we know that we can treat all people with fairness and respect. We can carry on the work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.?
I'm really sad. I mean, I do from before and stuff and classes and stuff that Dr. Martin Luther King died. You know, he was shot, right?
Yeah, he was shot.
And I knew that's sad, so I was preparing myself so I wouldn't cry. But I think it's really cool that people still remember him.
Yeah, nobody's forgotten him, and there's a holiday named for him.
And people still talk about his speeches and everything he stood for. Oh, I remember that time that you took me to his memorial that's due in Washington, D.C.
Oh yeah, I remember such a beautiful memorial that they made for him as a tribute, and he's carved out of this rock, and it's just so dramatic.
I think that's nice. And that means, like in that sign in the book, that he did not die in vain, because people remember and they're nice to each other, and they're nice no matter what. Like even though I am half dinosaur and half dragon, everybody's really nice to me. And I heard that a long time ago. Maybe people like me, they were like not okay, you know, in society. But now I'm okay, and maybe it's because of Dr. King making it okay for different people to be seen as people, and also dragons and dinosaurs.
That's exactly right.
I'm glad I understood. You did not die in vain, Dr. King. I shall treat everybody with love and fairness.
Also, I have a dream.
I also want to vote for you, Green Bear.
Yeah? Why?
Because, well, you're my friend. And also because I think you would be nice to everybody and fair.
That's right. I'll be good to everyone, and I believe in equal opportunity of chocolate for all people. And I don't care if you like dark chocolate,
Which I do.
or milk chocolate,
Oh, that's my favorite.
or also if you're crazy and you like white chocolate.
I'm not so crazy about that.
But some people are, and I want to know that no matter what kind of chocolate you like, you will be attended to by me, Green Bear, your president. Good night. Good night. Good night.
And happy Martin Luther King holiday. Bye, everybody.
Bye, kid. And remember, we can still continue the legacy of being fair to all.
Yeah. Bye.